definitions and give you this lay down there. I'm like, what's a lay down? Yeah.
Let's get started. I think we have in store for us a fairly long effort
Yes,
to
we
get
do.
done. So, this is the Tuesday, April 2nd, 2024 meeting of the, special meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to discuss the Plan of Conservation and Development draft that we have.
Something like that.
Commissioners Foley, Dexter, and LeBlanc are not present. Since we won't be taking any actions tonight, I don't think we'll bother to seat any of the alternates, because everybody is welcome and to participate, and we welcome your comments. And
Depends on whether you want him in on the vote to adjourn.
Okay.
If you seat him, he can vote to adjourn or not.
Yeah, I'll seat you for adjourning, okay? I suggest that the way we do this is to go through this section by section. I'll make another suggestion, which is the back is the implementation plan, and all of the objectives and strategies are listed in the implementation plan. So I'm suggesting while we follow along the main body, we also rip the back off and follow along that at the same time. So we don't have to discuss it twice.
Do you have printouts, or was I expected to,
I can go get you another one if you need one. It'd probably be easier for you to have one, so why don't I do that?
that would be great,
Yeah. Does anybody else need one?
ink's expensive.
As long as they have keys to get upstairs, which they must, because I drove here.
So, let's start with actually the table of contents. I found myself referring to the table of contents. Oh, by the way, everyone's welcome to comment. We'll do one section at a time. I'm not gonna go through the whole thing and then get comments, so.
And Steve, for a couple of the chapters, I have just a summary of the changes that have been made that maybe we can pause when we get there. It'll be maybe just easier to discuss them.
Great.
And bring up the maps.
But I found myself looking at the table of contents and trying to find where's the agriculture section. And I'd like to see a little more detailed table of contents so we can see subsections. I think a list of figures and maps should also be helpful at the front. Because again, there's some fantastic figures and even better fantastic maps in here that you keep trying to find. Any other comments on this part? Everybody's name is spelled right. Okay, so now I'm looking at the introduction. Personally, didn't make any comments here. Anybody else comments in the introduction, section 1?
One thing to note is that both the regional plan and the state plan are currently undergoing updates. So depending on the timeline, you may kind of rework this section a little bit for the final draft if those
Okay,
plans.
I have the original plan in my list of things to do by April 7th, I think. That's an even bigger document than this one. Okay, and then moving on to the section 2, which is South Windsor today. I think that picture is up to date. I don't know if anyone has any comments in there. I think on page 2-6.
So one, I know we're doing this in 10-year
Mhm.
chunks. Where are we at right now, population-wise, where it says 2020, 26,918? I just feel like in the last 4 years or last, like, the population has to have hockey sticked a little bit with all the people that are moving, the empty nesters that are moving out and families moving in. I feel like
So,
this does not reflect accurately where we are.
so we do note in the text on page 2-1, the first paragraph under demographics, the 2022 population estimates. The problem is the really only accurate population counts you get is the decennial census. It's the only statistic that's 100% count of your population. In the inter-census years, we rely on either DPH or census estimates, which are okay at best. So unfortunately, we reference the DPH population estimate, which I think is a stable trend as opposed to growth trend, but it's unfortunately the best data set we have available.
Only other data source might be the school system, because we know the houses, when we see new students enrolling and the population going up, at a minimum, that's the increase in population. We're assuming that there are 2 parents in each household before empty nesters to now, but with a bunch of kids, so they're.
But every year we're graduating kids from out of the high school, so we lose them every year. The age demographics are such that we have deaths going on in addition to births. The current census estimate for South Windsor is actually lower than the 2020 count, which is just an indication of the margin of error.
Yeah,
Because the methodology they use, I think Pat and I would be in hysterics here if we tried to explain this to you, what they do. So, as Pat said, it's just, there's not solid data until you get to a census year. So it's seems silly, and that's just the way that the Census Bureau works these days.
Even that's off by what, how much percent?
Oh, yeah,
I mean, it was April 1st of 2020.
Mhm.
So, and obviously there were challenges with the count due to COVID and, response rates and whatnot.
Has anybody ever gotten the American Community Survey, participated in it? So
I've
about
used
once
it.
a year, there's one out of every 500 households.
I have.
Yeah, so have I.
Constantly, yeah.
Yeah, and
Planners, they choose the planner.
Is that what it is? Well, I fibbed on mine just to mess them up.
All right, so
So it's unfortunate.
any other comments on this section? I have one comment on page 2-6.
Well, but just a quick thing before we leave Mike's comment. With the Board of Education having made a number of presentations to our board and the town council, I thought that the Dr. Carter's presentation was very good. It seems to me that maybe someone needs to make sure there's alignment between like some of the data that's in there and the data that's in here.
And we do
Because a
have,
lot of the same people would be looking at both and asking the same question, why is there a disconnect?
With purple, we're the only one growing over 10% in the whole state of Connecticut.
Yeah, and
and I believe in chapter 5 or 6, when we get into the development element, specifically talking about community facilities, we do talk about enrollment trends, South Windsor relative to the others, so it's in there. So I can add a note to just maybe do a quick reference to the enrollment trends.
yeah,
and
I'm
demographics
not
section.
looking to create more brain surgery, but
Yep.
it just seems like it would make sense to make sure there's some level of alignment between her data, which, I mean, isn't it from you guys?
Yep, and it's 100% count of the students, right?
Yeah.
So we have it every year,
Okay.
unlike the census, but we can't extrapolate your total population from that. We do know the 5 to 18-year-old population is growing. So we can certainly reference that with more up-to-date data in this chapter, if you like.
Okay, well, that would probably be good, a sentence or two there. On page 2-6 is a very nice figure of the existing zoning. I have this problem in a number of places where the colors in the key are so similar that when I look at the page, I can't figure out where these different things are. So I guess I would ask for more contrast in the colors, like RR and RR0. Is something we can do to make them look a little different, although they are labeled, I think. And likewise, all the AAs and AAs, very hard to look at the map and figure out which zone is which.
Sure.
And likewise, the multifamily, pretty much the same story. Now, do we have are we gonna try to show the MAHD? I think that's the only other zone. We have the overlay zone for Geisler's.
So I can reach out to Thad and see if they have it as a GIS file.
Mhm.
It wasn't in the file provided to me back in, running out, back in 2022. So I'll reach out to make sure we have the latest.
Yeah, because the Geises, we just settled with them and on that zone, so that's a fairly recent change. All right, anything else on that, on that section? Oh, I know, on page 2-7, second paragraph, third line from the bottom, it says between Route 5 and Sullivan Avenue. I think I'd like to have a third street in there, because it's really a triangle. I forget what the third street is.
Is it strong?
I think so,
Just
yeah.
Strong
West-
Road?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. And then down below, on the bottom of the page, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Town's 2023 Open Space Master Plan identifies properties that are desirable protection. That's a little grammatical change needed there.
For protection or what?
Well, it isn't clear what that means, so it needs to be clarified, rephrased. All right, and I also want to be on the lookout for pictures that are a little out of date. Well, none, I think those are all fine. Okay, anything else on section 2? Let's move on to section 3.
Steve, if I may, to intro this one, I did make a couple of changes based on the conversation at the February session, so
Okay.
would you like me to go over those first?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right, so to summarize the changes here, there was a couple of areas that we had talked about back in February. One was the Wheeler Drive property, which was originally in the Buckland Gateway Future Land Use Policy area, and we had kind of talked through two potential solutions. One was to create its own category,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the rationale being that this is really seen by PZC as a business property versus the mixed use in the Buckland Gateway Corridor. And that's what we ended up doing here, just to make sure that our residential densities plan and our future land use policies line up. So we don't have a break between those two.
So what does it say in the key for that?
So we have now the Buckland Periphery, which is just this property. It's your, I forget what the zone is for that
It's
property.
commercial.
Yes.
No, some kind of a commercial, it's a special commercial zone.
Yeah, and so it's basically, it aligns with that existing special commercial zone. And so this is also classified as non-residential on the residential densities plan. And then, Steve, I think you had pointed out a couple of properties just to the east of the town center, which are in the Buckland Gateway Zone, weren't originally in that category. Back in February, we have added those in, so now it better aligns with the zoning. The open space vision, Kevin had talked about some sensitivities around the Connecticut riverfront, specifically the greenway shown on the map. And so we have not changed the map itself, but we did add some clarifying text around the riverfront greenway, how it's envisioned as a passive corridor, really, you know, if you can protect land as it becomes available.
Yeah, this is page 3-14 for those of you who are fumbling through.
And then we noted the need to be sensitive to farmers and avoid conflicts. I know there's some concerns with the farmers there around ATVs, dirt bikes, and the like. So we just added some clarifying text there that it's passive, a passive greenway corridor versus an active one.
Okay. While you're on that page, again, there's a colors issue. Two different colors of open space are very similar.
Can you back up? I don't have but I think it's the first page of this section, the vision for the future with statement.
Yep.
So I kind of brought this up last time. And this is probably the marketing guy in me. I rewrote that a little bit, and I'm gonna hand out what I wrote. And my rationale is, one of the things that I would like to see in this document, I don't know where it goes, it may be the first page or second page, is kind of an overall description. So in the marketing world, we would refer to the elevator pitch. If you're getting in an elevator with a potential client or customer, what's the 30-second pitch that you would give them in order to try and sell them on what this is? We have a 93-page document here, right? How do you consolidate that down? So I rewrote this a little bit. Let me hand it out. We don't have to go over this now. You guys can look at it and, like it, don't like it. But what I wanted to do is try and include things in it that make us unique. I think you can look at that statement and say that applies to a whole bunch of different towns. So again, just food for thought. It's more of a descriptor of what this, process is and what this document is supposed to do, which I'm not sure we've kind of codified anywhere.
So here we're quoting the
What's that?
strategic plan.
Yep, so this is, the one that's in here is from the strategic plan from the town council. We could certainly have our own, and especially if it kind of summarizes the contents of the plan, so I'll defer to the group to give us the
Give
direction.
everybody a chance to read this for.
I have a question. One of the things that we've done with previous plans is the chairman's written a letter. It got included in the front of the plan. Kind of, and it was with a letter that we would send it to the different boards and commissions, inviting them to speak to the plan. But I read this and it just almost, to me, it might be, and it showed up in the front, like the front page of our plan is a letter, kind of.
It might be perfect.
Yeah, I agree, I think
It's
that's a
what
good-
it is, how it works, and what it's supposed to do. Boom, boom, boom. And it, to me at least, when I think about when I first moved here, what struck me about the town that was unique was its proximity to these major highways, which other places I was looking to move into didn't have. And the fact that you've got agriculture, rural, residential, commercial, it's as diverse gets. And I just think that those two things, we can call them out a little bit in a way that really shows our uniqueness.
Sure, so I'll add a
And-
note
and-
to add
and
this
that-
up front
yeah.
here. Summarizes it nicely, so thank you, Paul.
My pleasure.
The first sentence in the second paragraph will demonstrate how the plans will evolve.
Planners, that I'm referring to us. Maybe we want to call ourselves something different.
Oh, okay, the evolve is a transitive verb here, okay. Probably work on phrasing that a little different, but
Yeah, tweak it slightly, probably, yeah. Work
one
on
of my
that.
rules in reading something like this is if it makes me stop and think,
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
I'll rephrase it. Okay, so is the idea of including words like this in a letter from me to go in the front is fine, but what about how we feel about this in lieu of the text from the strategic plan?
I just wish that it had something to reflect and respect our history of agriculture and commitment to that in the future. Like I don't, the people unfortunately sometimes drive into town, what they see is not, it is industry and retail. And what I really want people, when they look at this, to look at is, this is it's a rural town that has a really unique mix of agriculture, open space recreational areas, and has some really interesting employment and retail opportunities for both residents and visitors.
I think we can, I mean, we cover that sort of in the fifth line of this, but we might wanna say something to the effect that it has evolved from a suburban community to, or from a, you know, an agricultural community to a suburban community, but it still retains blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, yeah, I like that too.
I don't know if I
It's
have-
just that the bigger letters in bold is what's gonna grab your attention. And I look at everything like I'm a fifth, a
You know,
third grader.
maybe you start with that
Mhm.
as an opening comment, and then halfway down is in the middle of the paragraph, is this strategic planning comment. So that you start with, you know, South Windsor is roots, you know, is rooted in agricultural history, you know, something like that, and then go on to say, in the strategic plan, the vision statement is. So you kind of set the tone for what you're.
Yeah, and then we could certainly unbold and kind of change the word or the sizing of the strategic plan vision to make it not kind of jump off as much too, so it's almost a blend of the two, right? We're acknowledging the strategic plan vision, but then adding in some of the unique elements that you bring in, so I think that's an option.
How do people feel about the font size here?
What is this, a 10? Is that what your font is, a 10?
It's bigger than 8, but it's not,
It's
The
not
font
11.
is different, so yeah, it's probably
Is it-
10.
10's the bulk of it?
Yeah, but a 10 in one font is different than 10 in another, but
Yeah.
if it's too small, we can bump it up.
I think this part that I had, you know, first of all, whether you like sans serif or serif is a whole different discussion, but the part that I was having the most difficulty with was some of the areas that we had bolding and then how close underneath the paragraph would start. It just seemed like spacing might needed to be adjusted slightly or coloring slightly. It just,
I'll make
some
a
of them
mental
didn't
note.
stick out, which I think was what the intent was on some of them.
yeah, the pictures in section 3, are they all current or, like, I think this is
Yeah,
this
there's
Whole
two
Foods?
two on page 3 that I'm not sure.
Mhm.
The third one down is not.
core.
All right,
Town Center
so
Core.
these are not all pictures for South Windsor, I should caveat
Oh,
that.
okay, all right.
I know where
So,
that is.
Town Center Core,
That's
Michelle probably
in
knows, Glenn
Avon.
probably
Yeah, I was gonna
knows.
say, that's not good.
Just there over the weekend, my son lives a mile from
And
that
same with
picture.
Town Center Periphery, that is not
Right,
South Windsor.
right. I was
What
saying-
Could we get one to South Windsor?
I guess the question becomes, do you think the Town Center Core, you have a picture that represents
What you're trying to
how
accomplish?
you want to
I see.
see it develop in the future? So it's really a vision, a picture of the future versus the present, I guess. And for the town center especially, it sounded like,
Mhm.
you know, we have the village center concept in place, but
So
we
how-
haven't gotten there with the project
How
yet,
about if
right?
we were to say then that these are core concepts or ideas? Because I think people are gonna immediately be like, well, that's not my concept.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was
So
looking
maybe we
all
just
over, where
kinda-
the heck is this?
Qualify it a little
Yeah,
bit so that
sure.
people aren't doing what we just did.
Yeah, let me add a note there.
Just somehow to
Just,
say that.
yeah, change the title so it's clear, it's,
Potential
Vision
center
or something.
development or vision or something like
Yeah.
that, something like, yeah.
and then town center periphery, again, this is not
Mm-hmm.
really our town, right?
No, not that
Correct.
one either.
Okay,
I thought when we talked about town center, actually, no, never mind, I'm confusing with Buckland Periphery, never mind.
okay, I had on page 3-4, the neighborhood nodes, does that also include Strong Road?
Strong Road, what do you think?
Strong crosses Route 5, and these are all places that cross Route 5, or some of
So
them.
the neighborhood nodes are Pleasant Valley and Long Hill Road,
Mhm.
where Derek's Barbecue is, and the other one is Oakland Road and Felt.
Or
And then we
restricted
have
commercial
cross
zone.
street nodes, which are the Route 5 ones, which has Pleasant Valley and Governor's Highway.
So do we also have one where Strong Road, that's what I was really thinking about. Do we also have one that crosses Strong Road?
Yeah, that's pretty industrial there, across the street is,
The old-
the moving place, right?
Yeah.
Temple moving, and then it was a furniture sale, but annexed as an industrial user, it's zoned industrial. I think of a neighborhood node as more of having more commercial and office opportunity, retail. To me,
Actually, we're talking about not a neighborhood node, but
Cross-street
a cross-street node. You know, do we wanna have that open to be a cross-street node, or is that kind of out of the question?
I don't think that's that particular. I think we were adding Pleasant Valley as a cross-street node potential,
Mhm.
right? We have it at Governor's,
Yeah.
and we're suggesting Pleasant Valley, which already has some commercial uses, but
Okay,
there's a potential for redevelopment and an expansion of the commercial, which I know the owners.
okay, so we won't do that, strike that comment. Again, are any of these pictures, confusing?
The only area that I think we're kind of missing a little bit in how we're treating it is the Route 5 corridor. We're totally not mentioning I-291 anywhere. And to me, when I think of all the warehouse development we've done it on the I-291 corridor rather than the Route 5 corridor,
What
right?
page
Because
is it?
so if on 3-5, for example, when we talk about Route 5 corridor, we're talking about our new facilities.
Mhm.
There's a couple places where I-291 didn't get mentioned anywhere. And I think I-291 was really a driving factor in the development of that area. And it's totally still.
Yeah, it's very important.
Very important that we recognize, because we treated the 291 corridor differently than we did other areas of industrial, so I'd like
So
to.
you actually wanna have a whole 291 corridor, or do you wanna
Well,
enhance?
it may just be that we can just pull it out of the Route 5 corridor. There's another place I think I made note of it too. Because I just didn't want to lump it all into Route 5, because I think it deserves its own call out.
So maybe a separate section on
Yeah, maybe we
291.
do want to do 291. Take a little bit out of,
Yeah,
blend it out
you
a
have a
little
separate zone down there,
bit.
right?
It's it's an overlay, or it's not even an overlay zone, it's a separate
Okay,
zone.
so should we maybe use that geography
Yep.
to kind of carve it off?
Yeah, we should, and we could get a nice picture of the Home Depot,
Mm-hmm.
just really.
Just, maybe I'm reading this wrong, but under Sullivan Avenue West, in the second line,
What page?
3-4, it says, given its location further from the Route 5 corridor. If I'm reading that, I would think that you're saying that it's further than the transition and the east, and it's not. That's probably the closest part of Sullivan Avenue to
Oh, yeah.
Route 5.
You probably want to see from the interstate highway system is really what you're furthest from.
Something like that, yeah. It just, I
Not
think
Route
it
5, but interstate
flip-flops
highway, yeah.
the way you look at it.
Yeah.
Mhm. Wow, we're picking up a lot of good.
So, on the Sullivan Ave West, to say that supporting smaller warehousing,
Mhm.
where we have,
You have two of the big
we have FedEx, we have Geodis, we have whatever the other
Mobius,
PFG businesses,
yeah.
Hyundai, yeah. That's not, we're not smaller warehousing over there.
Well, what you have left for development over there would be something smaller than either of those. There's a piece across, it's actually under design right now, across from Aldi's. That's gonna come in, it's gonna be smaller than that. What we approved at the end of Kennedy Road is smaller than some of those other ones. In warehouse, I think has this connotation of being big warehouses, which is what we've been traumatized by. A lot of warehousing too that I think of is just like, a manufacturer that has a warehousing component to his business. Because we have a lot of that small kind of stuff, especially in the Commerce Way area, which I think is Sullivan Ave West. So I think, and there's a couple vacant pieces down there that aren't large, so they're not gonna support anything huge, but might support some warehousing as a part of its business type thing. So I think, and we went to great lengths in our regulations to kind of define different types of warehousing with square footages and things like that, which all would have to be respected for anybody looking to design anything.
So
we're
it's
trying-
really, I think the contrast of what we've allowed in the past and what we want in the future, I think is what we're seeing here, right?
And you're not really gonna get what you got in the past, we just, by design, there's not a lot of
enough
left,
space left.
yeah.
So maybe a little, in the future, we're focusing more on, as you phrase this here. Okay. All right. Any other comments in section. And you just showed us figure 3.1 with the Buckland periphery. I think it's already in here, right?
Correct.
Again, on figure 3, on page 3.8, figure 3.2. The color there doesn't show up against the white background.
Okay.
So there you need a little bit darker color, because I guess if I hold this the right way, I can see it's a very light yellow. All right. Now we get heavy into sewers starting on page 3.9. We've had meetings with the WPCA, and the WPCA has met and talked about this.
I think there was one change to the map on
Yeah.
310 that we all agreed made sense.
Up at the end of Abbey Road.
Yeah, at the end of Abbey Road where we just put in Maskell subdivision. It actually doesn't show the sewer extended there, but the sewer does go all the way with those houses. It's
Up
going
here,
along.
Michelle?
Yeah.
On my cursor is.
So there's a power lines right there. So the suggestion was to carry that right straight through, because the chances are that road will go north right there and come out either further up Abbey Road. There's a pond, so it's not gonna go to the east, to the east and go to Barber Hill. And of course, we're septic all the other side, but I think the idea was to make it consistent so that you had sewers up there already.
So basically cut it on the,
Cut it
on
on
the
the
east
power
side on the
line.
electrical right away?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because you're not gonna have a road go through, at
Mhm.
least not without wetlands impact.
Yep.
I don't think that'll happen. So I think that was something that, they've had some people come, Peter DeMalley specifically, to lobby about specific concern pieces. So that was one, and I think that one is one that, kind of makes sense. The other piece that was of concern, I think this map takes care of it, was on the corner of Pierce and Ellington. What we did in the language here supports, we said somewhere between 200 and 500 feet would be how far sewer would extend into those areas to accommodate frontage lots or frontage types developments. And I think the area that he had a concern was certainly, it was in a no sewer area, so this gives you an opportunity for sewer.
There's an existing sewer line on.
Right, and there's an
Road,
existing
so-
property on the corner that's sewered, that I'm not sure if it's showing up there as sewered or not, but it is currently sewered on
The
the
house on the corner is?
Yeah. I think
Oh, I
it
didn't
is.
know.
According to the other sewer map we have, I believe it is. Yep. But, there's 50 acres right next to it that's cut out differently from it.
So go ahead.
So then the other one that was questioned, and this is one that, is more for WPCA to deal with a little bit. As you recall, on King Street, nobody recalls maybe, but in 2006, we approved a church there. And it was called the Chinese Baptist Church, and they were gonna sewer into East Hartford. And the WPCA approval at the time said that a sewer agreement would have to be executed with East Hartford, which we have in a couple areas, but the trailer park, which is further west, is sewered by East Hartford. Fast forward to today, that agreement was never executed, the approval was never, it was kept active in that it was extended to 2020, but nothing was ever built. Property sold, and the new owner has some ideas out there to put a church, but also do a lot of housing, and they'd like it to be sewered. So they're trying to take advantage of the 2006 approval, which is, no longer in existence. So philosophically, it's one of those ones, you can put septic in that area, it's sandy over there. I don't think we wanna.
No.
As I said to the chair of WPCA, the zoning's not in place for housing there, other than single-family housing. That's kind of a future discussion, so I think we have some language in here about some possible exceptions, and obviously, plans can change as.
And I think
as
too,
as-
a process going forward is gonna be, should PZC
decide they
look
wanna do
at changes to zoning, right? That might come with a
And densities
recommendation to
and stuff.
WPCA to update the sewer policies map accordingly, right?
I don't think it's a big enough one to really worry too much about, because it's not, nothing's more working too quickly on it, but it is just one of the areas, I think that was one of 3 areas that was, I don't think that was it.
Yeah, that was it, those 3 areas.
Those are 3 areas that were primarily of
So,
discussion that they were still like,
so there's a question about when WPCA will get around to adapting this. I think the chair would like to do it fairly quickly.
Okay.
But whether they can encourage the whole group to do that. So I think we have a requirement to have the, maybe I'm wrong, but I think we have a requirement to have the sewer plan in here.
So the language in the statutes is you have to have a map showing the general area of where sewers exist, where sewers should be extended, and where they should be avoided. It doesn't have to be your sewer plan per se.
Okay,
So we have a little bit of time.
Okay.
We're not of the urgency that this has to get done.
Yeah, the question was, should we put the existing one in this one in the plan to cover ourselves? But it sounds like we probably don't need to.
Nope, I don't think so.
now I would like you to compare this figure with the figure on page 714. What I like about that figure is how much bolder the sewer lines are.
Mhm.
I mean, the one here, sometimes I can't tell, like, West Road, is that Seward, is that green or is that black, you know? So, I kinda like, I don't care about I talk about the way you draw the streets, not the little
Yeah.
areas around the streets, but just change the thickness of that line so it's
Yeah.
a little more visible.
Actually, I think I have parcels on here that I
Yeah,
can,
maybe parcels are.
I'll make a folder.
And then, this is just a nuance, but between Nevers and Graham, Long Meadow, that whole thing is sewered.
Between where?
Nevers and Graham, just
Yeah, we
north
probably
of
should get
Hayes.
you an updated parcel.
Yeah.
Underlying parcel base for that.
Yeah, I have whatever GIS files that the town provided, so if you
Yeah,
have an updated one that
Let
has
me,
some of
yeah,
the
let
new
me,
subdivisions.
see if I can't get
Where
that.
the hand is right now?
Yeah, that's South Windsor Wood, or South Estates at South Windsor,
States of
right?
South Windsor, yeah.
Yeah, so some of the new ones were not in the file that was provided, so
Okay,
if
so I'll see if
if
Thad
engineering
doesn't
has
have
an
a newer
updated
one.
one, yeah.
And throw that in there, and the sewers would be on it.
So just out of curiosity, this is more on the sewer thing. Aside from Barber Hill, Needleworfer, and Old Main Street, everything else that is not sewered just looks like wetlands. Is that accurate?
Well, you have the golf course, which is in Griffin Road,
Yeah.
right? It's not sewered. You have that
talking-
area up there is pretty wet,
The,
yeah.
the big chunk in the middle there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
that's
just-
the central preserve wetlands, yep, yep.
So
That is a
essentially-
true statement,
We're essentially,
a sewer town.
we're almost fully sewered, right?
Not my house.
Actually, it's surprising the number of septic systems that still exist in town that can hook into the sewers, because the sewers are there, but
We just don't.
even up in Tumblebrook, I saw one recently, Steve, aren't you in Tumblebrook? Somebody still has a septic on Tumblebrook.
Really?
Yeah, they were just looking to see what the cost of getting the sewers was.
Yeah.
So surprisingly, they
The
still exist
older-
out there.
Yeah, Tumblebrook has got a section of raised ranches. It's probably one of them. They're a little older than my house was built 40 years ago. We got sewer. That's it on the sewers. Moving on to 311, which is the open space vision. It's interesting, you list all these people who, we talked about this before, but all these people who have some say in open space, and I don't know, how are we gonna get us to work together?
The open space task force is probably the closest you have, right? Because it's kind of a
It's got
task
representatives
force
of
of
different.
representatives, right?
Okay. But I don't think we actually, do we consult with them every time we do an open space development? or-
Absolutely,
Mhm,
it's part of the
okay,
process, yeah.
okay.
The reason being is the town council has to agree to any open space you decide to approve as open space, right? So the process is that they review it on behalf of the town council makes a decision whether or not they would recommend you require the town take it or not. So it's all part of the loop.
So again, on page 314, colors, first two colors are, I imagine they look pretty good on a computer screen, but not on paper, you know? So let's go look at the objectives
Well, I just have one comment on page 314. If we need to take what goes along the river, Kevin requested that. We talked, there's some language in there about it,
Yep.
but I don't think we want to show it on the plan. He's requested come up. Just because we had an attempt many years ago at getting easements in that area, and it turned out, they had sunset provisions on them, and they all expired, and it was not a very positive experience for the farmers down there with what occurred on their properties down there. So it is all privately owned, we have no town ownership on any of it.
So take what off?
The showing a pathway,
The dotted line on
dotted
the
line
river.
right along the river. This is not realistic to accomplish.
Yeah, so I think it comes down to a greenway isn't necessarily a trail, right?
Well, I
But
guess
but I
that's what we
think it's
wanna.
gonna be perceived as a
It's a trail,
trail on
yeah.
the map.
Yeah.
But I think the nice thing about the riverfront is that it's captured in some of the other categories, right? It's in the rural, or it's in the conservation priority area, and it's in largely BA 490, which are both called out,
The
so.
problem is, people see maps like that and they think they got rights to them.
So,
And that's what worries me is that is, we don't have a very good, we actually are now, closing off Vibbert Road at times because we have such problems down at the river, so I just wouldn't want someone to pick up this map and assume they can pike a trail down there.
Sure, so should we leave the text, but
Yeah,
maybe
you can leave the
remove
text, the
the
text
dotted
talks
line?
about potentially sometime in the future you might do a
Yeah.
trail, but showing it on a map, I think is just a little
Yep, I agree. I think
too-
that makes sense.
too visual.
So, on several of the maps, there are pictures of the Crosstown Trail. This one up at Niederwerfer shows it crossing Niederwerfer, other ones don't show it crossing Niederwerfer. So I think what I would ask is that we have them all the same.
So I sent you I sent you the plans, right, at one time?
I have a PDF, but I don't have a CAD file.
Okay,
If you have a
think-
CAD file of an engineering, or if that has it, that would be,
Yeah, let me see what I can get for you, because it changed several times, so I know we've had different versions, so I'm not sure what version we gave you early on. So let me see if I can get you.
And the middle is still in flux, like we're across the
We're
side.
I know, because this is showing crossing kind of in the middle, but,
Yeah.
I guess, this is more pictorial than anything else, I guess, is what we really have to
Yeah.
look at it for.
Because we don't know how we're coming across Sullivan
Exactly.
Avenue right now. And then this trail that leads off, I'm on 314, that leads off to the left of the word town, cross town trail. I don't know what that is.
So I think that was your idea, to try to create some kind of greenway through our existing open space, right? Kind of trying
Yep.
to,
So that's coming from Nevers, coming like through Nevers, right?
right?
Across.
That would be, that's
School.
maybe Michael Donnelly is the blue that or the green that it's in behind.
yeah, it's more vague.
We're just talking about was whether or not in the legend, rather than have it say other greenway corridor, which gives it some level of expectation, refer to as possible future greenway corridor. It's meant to be an idea, a concept, and it might provide. I still think taking the river trail out is still a good idea, but just changing the legend.
So, Old Main Street is such a gem. We go down there all the time and just ride bikes down there.
Yeah.
Because there's no, the traffic's slow. You just put that other greenway corridor right on Old Main Street. It is kind of an attraction with all the old houses and the old post office and some other stuff.
I mean, it is probably the most popular bike trail in town.
It doesn't show up on, I think it shows up on our other mapping though for biking.
I think it shows up on the biking.
It does
Yep.
show up as a location or as a trail already, I think, another part of the plan.
So let's see, we got objectives for section 3.
We have objectives starting on chapter 5.
Oh, okay,
I think we're okay there.
all right.
Can I jump in with kind of a question out of left field? It has to do with liability. So an applicant comes before us and they say your regulations say X, Y, and Z, and if you don't comply with those, I will sue you, kind of thing, right? Does this carry that same weight?
plan, this is a vision,
Okay.
10-year vision.
Yeah.
These plans
Because
are
we're
what
being
you
very,
make your regulations out
we're
of.
being very specific about these maps, like if it shows something,
No, but I just know how people use them, because they come in my office and they look at these things. And they want the copy of that. And then it's like, okay, what are you gonna use it for? I just, to me, a dotted line means I can walk on it. That's all. And some of the ones, and I think there's a lot of good visuals in here, and I think
Yeah,
that's what people are gonna be
definitely.
attracted to.
we want it to be accurate,
Yeah.
but
I mean, I think these maps are fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else on section 3?
I love your graphic for 4-1, good job. That was so good.
Moving on to sustainability and resiliency. A lot of that is very theoretical and has to be hypothetical, because we hope these things don't happen.
So one of the things, having a new landscape architect in my office, under the goals of 4.2, I really didn't see invasive species and native planting called out as far as, you know, in the goals there, as far as trying to, I thought maybe we could add those. More native species.
What are you asking for? I didn't understand.
As a goal to add more biodiversity in our plantings and also to discourage invasive species
Mhm.
as part of sustainability.
So these
Yeah,
goals
you
are
could
not
probably
in,
be
Not
just
anyway,
that,
so-
added into somewhere, yeah.
these are not in section 8, right?
So these are just kind of overarching principles, and then we have specific goals, objectives in chapters 5, 6, and 7 that are in the implementation plan, but nothing specific to chapter 4.
Okay, so it said the detailed strategies are included in the other chapters, I read that now, okay.
I would love to see something incorporated under the ecologically sustainable about our ability to produce our own food in town. And just give recognition to the fact that we have a viable and strong farming community here. It's an asset.
That may even be under so, that's kind of, probably crosses the line between ecological and social, but that's a great point too. I think we have some of those in the conservation chapter.
Yeah, we talk about some of those different things we do, but this is good,
I mean, that's almost a regional thing as well, because, like you go to the farmer's market on Avery Street and you buy the corn there, and sometimes it's grown in South Windsor, and sometimes they have to bring it in from other places, but it's regional.
Yeah, we have little farm stands around town. We permit quite a few of them.
Oh.
These people just-
They have the best corn, I gotta tell you. I just drool. I mean, I've been teasing the guy when I see him. I said, how come there's no corn yet? You know?
Climate's changed like that.
It's gonna snow tomorrow night.
Yeah, I know. Don't plant yet.
Welcome to New England.
I don't know if anybody's got anything in section 4 or other. So we decided that this was not gonna be an actual separate section, but that we'd spread these into the other chapters. That was like one of our original guiding principles, right?
Decisions, yes.
Okay. So, section 5, anybody ready to go? Okay.
I think I'd mentioned on 5.4, the wellhead map, we would adjust that.
So if I'm looking at this from the outside, the first bullet point I'd love to see is community sentiment, just to have it right up front that this is what the people in South Windsor are concerned about. Some of the challenges we've had with the movement. And everything else follows from that. So because of that, we're taking stormwater management, water quality, wildlife habitat, et cetera, into consideration.
The stormwater management is both a ecological thing where we, you know, we try to get the water back into the aquifer, et cetera. It's also a safety thing. I guess we covered that in both sections.
So we're talking about moving community sentiment first.
The first item, yeah. I think, again, it sets the tone right for that first, you know, what do we think about conservation?
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot.
And then we just would change our order of objectives, yeah.
So, can we move on to page 5.2? I have a couple comments there. Part of the problem I was having, in like looking at some of the maps and seeing text, is there's abbreviations for things. So, like objective B, we have natural diversity database, NDDB, put that in there, parentheses. And I'll get at another place where we use NDDB and I'd like to see it spelled out. Then ZR, I think we don't need ZR, just spell it out, zoning regulations. And then the bullet that says encourage or require the planting of native species, I think we gotta say something about avoiding species that are unlikely to survive because of pandemic, you know, blights and pestilence, or I don't know if you can find a way to express it, but, you know, we probably shouldn't be planting ash trees right about now. Okay, and so if a developer comes in and
Or resilient native species.
Yeah, yeah, it's,
resilient, yeah. Okay, that does it. Nice picture of a detention pond there. Nice picture of a wetland corridor, riparian.
so at 5.5, I gotta get back to our acquisitions because the progress over the last decade. We bought, Porter's Hill within the last 10 years, and I don't think I have that. I wanna go check and make sure, we may have bought some other pieces, make sure. But Porter's Hill is right over there by the, community center.
Okay.
A really important purchase the town made. And I'll double check and see if there's any other purchases that we
Okay.
made.
Back on 5.3, can you spell out MDDB?
Maybe we need a glossary of abbreviations. Yeah.
Even so, I mean, the problem is you're looking at this figure and you know, people who just look at the pictures shouldn't have to go through the document to try to find out what that, and I spent actually about 10 minutes looking for it. It's a very interesting picture, though.
Michelle noted before, we'll take the well field off of this map here because it's inactive now.
What about the Talcatville well field, is it still going?
They haven't indicated to me that it's not, so
Okay.
I actually got a letter about the other ones. There's one piece that would be affected.
So I didn't know that the, what's the river on the north there,
Scantic?
Scantic River is got an impaired waterfall.
Yeah, you found that on the state's listing of.
Yeah, assessed and impaired water bodies list.
Yeah.
So is it, people still canoe in there and everything, is it?
Usually, so they have kind of two levels. One is it safe for like fish, like if you catch a fish, can you eat it? And then the other is, can you go swimming in it? Generally boating, you're okay. Connecticut River, almost in its entire length, is gonna be impaired, which means you probably don't wanna swim in it. You probably don't wanna eat fish that you're catching it, but if you wanna ride your boat, go for it.
Okay. All right, I'm ready to move on to section 5.5, which is the open space discussion. By the way, we should be looking at the strategy, so on page 8.3, now we're going to page 8.4.
Yes, the goals and objectives are the same. The only added information in the implementation plan is the responsible entity, support entity, and timeline. So any change that I have here, to make edits to those objectives or strategies, I'll make in the implementation element as well.
So I notice PZC gets a lot of these. Some of our work is cut out for us, I guess.
I guess I just question A1. Why wouldn't A1 be the wetlands being the lead entity as far as a no net loss approach? I thought that would be through a wetlands regulation. So I think we want those to be reversed. We can certainly support it, but I think it's wetlands that's gotta be the lead.
At the beginning, before everyone came in, I suggested to Josh that he actually make notes on the PDF file. And you're doing the same thing.
We can compare notes.
I mean, just send it to him, we can incorporate it in the minutes, and he doesn't have to say, Commissioner Wagner said. So down on, we haven't gotten to B5 yet, so. give me a minute.
And A6 too, Pat, I think I would add planning to that as well as engineering, just from an educational perspective for.
Sorry, under open space?
Yeah, A6 under the, I'm sorry, natural resources, would that be?
Natural resources, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah.
Add PZC to support.
Well, no, I'd actually, if you have engineering, I'd ask planning, again, from an educational perspective, we have materials that we would give out related to that stuff.
Now move on to open space, which is page 8.4 and page 5.5. So under protect and enhance open space resources, somewhere in here I'd like to have us highlight blazed hiking trails. And the contrast I have is, you go into Vernon, you've got this great rail trail, but you also have all kinds of blazed trails, a red trail, I think it's a green trail, it's a lot of fun to hike around in there, and we're pretty limited in that respect. Some of those, I guess, Wapping Park has some trails that aren't really marked out, but they're there. There's a lot of kind of de facto trails in town.
Well, a lot of ours are like maintained. If I go into, whether it's, really the big ones are Nevers, or what's the open space off of Clark? What's the open space? So Nevers.
Wapping is one off of Clark.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Wapping, those are, and Donnelly, those are all like, I don't know how we blaze them, they're maintained and.
They're kind of a higher level trail. I mean, I'm talking about the ones that are only wide enough for one person, and so yeah, there's some of that in there.
So Steve, what are your thoughts about adding that to objective C? We have the bullet that kind of is our catch-all that talks about various improvements.
Manage and enhance existing open spaces that
Yeah.
you're looking at.
So either adding blazing trails or whatever language you use to kind of the list here, or adding its own bullet. It's kind of the spot where it fits.
Yeah, I would have probably put it under A, but B, I think like there's a whole trail that you could do from Cadwell all the way down to Beelzebub. hasn't been mapped out, hasn't been hiked out a lot, but for that neighborhood that's behind, PR Smith, that would make a really nice trail, about a mile and a half long. Take advantage of some of the flood control dams and so on. And John Caldwell is gonna shoot me for saying that. Anything else on, page 5, 6?
I mentioned to Pat that, just as the earlier comment in the natural resources section was about moving community sentiment to the front, one of the things you could also do here in open space is take the paragraph top left of page 5, 6 and move that to the front of open space. So we start off again with the
Good
importance
idea,
to
yeah.
residents.
Good idea. Okay, anything else on, section map on, 5, 7, any comments? I guess I'm wondering, do we know all the existing trails, or this is another thing where we basically took it off of one of our layers?
Yeah, so we basically took what I believe that had a trail layer. I don't know how complete it is or whatnot, but that could be kind of part of our ask, Michelle, is
Yeah,
just
to
kind
see
of
if there's
confirm
anything
that, make sure
updated.
we have the latest and greatest, cause
Yeah.
so our initial data request was probably,
A while ago,
a year and a half ago, so
Yeah,
we may added some things to that since.
yeah, John Caldwell should probably be able to help you with that.
And I think also even, hopefully over the next decade, this layer will be updated. So just if the legend says, you know, may not be up to date, check down website for more information,
Yeah.
some other.
Yep.
Yeah, as it gets older and older.
On these maps, should we be consistent about including labels? So some seem to have, some don't.
Missing roads.
Cause as I look at this, I don't know what streets I'm looking
Yep,
at.
no, great point. That was an oversight from my side, so. Glad
Just
it
the
was-
main roadways, of course.
Like, you know, just be consistent with like we're doing on the others.
Yep, no, good catch.
Agricultural resources, page 5, 8.
Pat, am I missing it? But I don't see anything here. You know, we did create an agritourism regulation based on our last plan, and I don't think we talk about it in this paragraph here, so. And we did approve a winery, remember, over on Foster Street, but, you know, it's just another opportunity for folks to take a look at.
It's always important to recognize what you've accomplished over the last 10 years as part of this, because I think a lot of times people, you know, I'm sure you see it, people come to your meetings and generally that's, you know, folks who are in opposition to something. So it's always good to recognize the hard work you've done over the last 10 years, so we'll make sure.
You recognize the brewery in here somewhere? I mean,
Oh, you want another picture?
I think I have a picture of it.
We got a picture of it.
somewhere, yeah.
Pictures here.
I hope he's making as much money as the parking lot seems to indicate.
He's doing just fine.
Actually, you have another brewery in town that just does brewing, does
Yeah.
not have any.
Yeah.
And there's actually a third one that's trying to get building permits. Just to do small scale brewing.
Okay, so now agricultural resources, which would be page 8, 5.
Here's where we talk about your heritage, your cultural heritage, which adds to what we did earlier.
You know, we just had in front of the planning and zoning, someone that was getting a, what do you call it, at the state level, to go to the farmer's market for a bakery in her house. Cottages.
Cottage food operation.
Yeah, so do we talk about that at all in here? It's encouraging that kind of stuff because I've actually had two people since her contact me about it, so we're seeing that as kind of a growing little.
Home
Interesting
business?
Yeah, home business, so if they wanna, get ready to be able to sell at the farmer's market.
Do we want to encourage that?
Do you like to go to the farmer's market and buy homemade goods?
Occasionally.
Then I think we wanna encourage it. They're licensed through the state, they're licensed locally when they go to the market. The health department has a sign off for anybody that has a booth there, but the cottage industries themselves are licensed through the state Department of Public Health and Human.
Support and promote cottage food businesses, that captured.
Or calm operations.
Not what it can do, yeah.
So I think, I'm looking at page 5-9. I love all the farming and everything, but I have a fear of factory farming. I just wanna make sure somehow we dealing with that. I know that like marijuana is a type of factory farming, but I'm thinking more of chicken and pigs and, that they do in these gigantic buildings and they're have a negative impact on the neighborhood if they're built. Do we,
I think we prohibit slaughterhouses currently in the regulations.
I hope we do.
Only except for on your street.
Where I have no sewers.
well, it's a mixed-use community.
We're gonna turn them into cottage food operations, so it's all
There
gonna
you
work.
go.
In all seriousness, I've had someone inquire fairly frequently about wanting to have a space where you can pick the chicken that they'll kill for you to have for your, to take home with you, so I mean, it is a real thing.
Now, does that make them into a slaughterhouse or is that?
Unfortunately,
I mean, you can-
not from a state licensing perspective, no, they're not I think maybe they are a butcher, I think they do become a butcher at that point. So things are changing in that world, so that some of them that are out there are not conforming to today's rules, it's changing. But it is something that people do look to do.
Actually kind of a nice thing. But do we prohibit, the kind of factory farming?
I think we do, but I'll double check for you.
I don't think we have enough space. Like, I look at Ellington with what's the giant, the huge milk place.
The guy that does all the milk, yeah,
I'm drawing a blank on their name.
out there on,
We have it delivered to our house. I don't even know why I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, I don't think we have enough, we don't have any contiguous bodies of land here that would support anything like that.
I mean, it's just a building, right?
No, they have multiple buildings, they have this huge thing, it's like a carousel where there's 200 cows on it at one time and it goes around at like 2 miles an hour and they get milked while they're standing there, and when they get to the other end, they're done getting milked and they're washed and cleaned, and
It's a full-blown dairy farm.
it's a huge dairy, yeah.
Yeah,
Near
but
Clover
automated-
Farms, I think.
yeah, out that way. It's on Penny Road, if you keep going up Penny Road, you'll get to it.
Yeah, we don't have space for that here, do we?
I don't think so.
But so Steve, to your point, does a solar farm, is that the same as the factory farm kind of
No.
thing you're talking now?
It's not even a farm.
Or like if I think of.
It's a term we use, but it's not.
Or I think of in Simsbury, if you go to the south end of town, right at the Avon border, there used to be a United Illuminating Eversource building there. And Curaleaf went in and bought it and turned it into a huge indoor marijuana agriculture.
I believe the state statutes do say that marijuana cultivation is not considered an agricultural
Yeah,
use.
it's industrial use.
So I'm not concerned, what I'm concerned about are these buildings that have, 1,000 little cubes with chickens in them. And that's how they raise chickens that we eat. They do them in these buildings, they don't raise them on farms. But they can be very smelly and produce all kinds of wastewater problems and so on.
I cannot imagine a farmer that would find that economically feasible with the cost of land in this town. That works in Sterling, Connecticut, or Union, or somewhere where the land costs.
process.
I think that would be a struggle here, personally.
I think it may conflict with the right to farm objective. If,
Well, that-
even if it's even if it's not realistic and even if it wouldn't happen, I worry that if we have language in there that then starts to restrict agricultural uses, that kind of runs against the right to farm.
But all
Language
rights
we-
have limits, okay?
Yeah.
I mean,
Certainly.
you know, you can't, you know, it's the fire, you know, yelling fire in a packed theater. It's a limit on free speech, there's limits on all of our rights. So, is this an area where we need to have a limit? I guess I would ask Michelle to look at that.
Yeah, I could take a look. We don't, I know we address it in our residential zone, but we don't have it in our industrial commercial zone specifically.
Can we have it just as supporting or encouraging traditional farming methods rather than maybe as just as a way to say we're not supportive of somebody coming in and putting up a chicken factory here.
Yeah, I don't know.
So we allow agriculture, and we say, for example, forestry operations, cultivated lands, animals, under our permitted uses in the industrial zone, for example. So you allow agricultural uses.
Just mentioned to Pat that it might be an idea to say something like high-intensity industrial farming operations have never been part of South Windsor's agricultural history. So you don't actually directly come out
Okay.
and make a negative statement about farming, but you single it out as
Acknowledge the
being,
reality.
it's not really part of our
We
sort of
tend to keep it
concept
that
here.
way.
Okay, there's a little blurb on solar on farm. It mentions the siting council. It says the town has no involvement, but we can have influence. I wanna kind of somehow emphasize that. And then at the bottom, I think we kind of get into that. I would add something like, and minimize the negative impacts such as noise and, I don't know, view or something like that.
It's a true statement, though. We do have no involvement in the actual approval process.
Well, what you mean by involvement is we don't have any official say, but we do have involvement in the form of influence if we choose to go there.
Maybe the phrase limited influence. The town has limited influence in the approval process. So
Yeah.
we can participate, we can tell them that they're, you know,
Okay, that makes more
off the
sense,
rockers,
yeah.
et cetera, but
That could work.
Yeah, I like
they'll make
that.
whatever decision they feel is appropriate.
The thing about editing in a group is somebody comes up with better wording.
Reminds me of the commercial, they all do it online and they cancel a meeting. That didn't happen here. One of those NCAA commercials.
So again, you know, minimizing the negative impacts. Do we want to try to encourage what's called, I know I can't remember the right phrase, but you mix solar and agriculture on the same site?
Yeah, where the sheep are grazing and
Sheep grazing, you can actually grow tomatoes. Tomatoes do very well under solar panels, it turns out, you know.
What's interesting is if you recall when New Way Tobacco came in, they did have, I believe, goats out there. And I did witness them out there. But some of these places want to get a farming,
Goats, I think they wouldn't put out there.
but it was sheep, maybe it was
Sheep,
sheep.
yeah, goats eat the wires.
Okay, so it was sheep there. But the
Climb on the
from the
panels.
assessor's perspective, if they want to get a farming, keep their 490 and have solar on it, you have to demonstrate some kind of farming thing. So that is where that kind of gets encouraged.
The last bullet under objective B does talk about co-locating solar collectors and active farm uses is desirable. So I think that was a comment
Okay.
from February that made it in here.
Okay, good.
So that's just copying what Simsbury's doing in that last bullet, to encourage that. Good.
We move on to page 510. Let's see. So we're pretty happy with all the objectives there. Okay, on 510, community ambiance. Another phrase for not in my backyard, but okay.
Formerly character. formerly known as character.
X, right? Formerly known as.
Banana build absolutely nothing or anything anywhere. So, somewhere in there, I was starting to get the feeling that we had confused the actual historic district with, oh yeah, I know, on page 512, there's one of the things in the key is a dot. And it says National Historic District contributing properties, but they're not all the dots are in the historic district. The drawing is correct. But the bullet needs to be revised.
Okay, I'm just,
See the dot at the bottom there?
Yeah.
Yep, I think there's another,
No, I'm talking about the label, the key.
yep.
Change the phrasing of the key for the dot.
Oh, I see.
I'm just curious,
no,
at the
hang
end
on
of
a
Ferry
second.
Lane, I didn't realize our district went to the end of Ferry Lane. Did you find it on our?
This is from the new state,
Database.
CRIS
See, but we have a
database.
local historic district, right? And I don't think it includes the Ferry Lane piece.
This is the challenge we always end up with, is that a national historic district is different than a local. A local is regulatory.
But
And a
that's what you're
national-
showing this as being
This
local.
piece, right?
Yeah, so I'm surprised it's showing up there.
So I'll take a look at the Ferry Lane piece.
Well, I have a book upstairs that identifies them by address.
Okay.
So I'd be curious, and by mapping, and it does,
Yeah.
my recollection, it's never included that piece, so we gotta look at that.
So I'll say.
I don't doubt it's a historical property,
Yeah.
but I don't believe it's in the district per se.
Yeah, so maybe a national, but, okay.
So there's nothing other than up and down Main Street.
On Long Hill, there should be some identified
You have it,
properties,
you have
right?
some structures that are listed individually. Like Michelle mentioned on Long Hill Road, you have the Elmore.
Get the Pleasant Valley
houses.
Schoolhouse is on.
And then, yeah, Schoolhouse, Priest Farm, but they're not districts, they're just individual properties.
So there's nothing down towards the river?
The National Historic District it includes basically the entire area along Main Street, including all the way up to the river.
Okay.
So what was done, which is kind of interesting, is the Historic District Commission paid over several years 3 different studies, which really is quite comprehensive of properties in town. And they did an architectural analysis of all properties and tried to gather history of it. So it's a huge resource for anybody that has an older home. And it's out on our website under Historic District Commission. And it really, if you're buying an older home, you can find out a bunch of information about it out there. So that's, I don't know if it's in here at all that we mention it, but I always feel badly that so few people know about it, because it really is interesting. To know about the historical resources inventory is what it's called. We have 3 phases of it.
Then,
Pay a lot of money for it.
figure on 512, has 2 triangles in the key. They seem to be the same color.
Pat and I were just talking about the colors on the map and whether or not the legibility and differentiation might work better if we're using some different colors for different categories.
Yeah, so those colors are confusing. I guess one is really blue and one is really green, but pretty close. So on the goals, on page 511, we want to include ferry, okay, the bullet under objective A, all the way down to the next to the last bullet, we want to include Ferry Lane in there.
Yep, this one, Steve?
It says, continue to work with property owners and residents to preserve the unique character of Main Street.
Yeah, and Ferry Lane, it's worth adding.
And Ferry Lane, yeah.
I mean, there's some properties there that are very interesting properties.
And then, under objective B, the second item. Talking about utilities, somehow work in, by using underground utilities, something like that.
I guess on 511, and I'm curious about this, I know there was a public act that passed that we just talked about a couple minutes ago about the term character. It was mentioned on 511 when it talks about continue to work with property owners and residents to preserve the unique character of Main Street. Do we just want to fill that in with ambiance? Because again, the last thing I want is for that to be brought up and then saying, oh, we have this public act that's saying that we can't use this term anymore.
So the statute doesn't say you can't use the term, what it says is you can't use the concept of character to
Okay. deny
you use. But I think it's best to steer
Start
away
using
from
away
that
from it.
conversation and change character to ambiance. Agree with that.
Find and replace.
It's kind of like ways.
So let's see, objective C, continue to utilize the architecture and design review committees to result in residential and business developments. Well, I'd like to, we're looking at both kinds of development. And I was thinking at the bottom, like another objective C, I don't know if people like this idea, encourage the use of murals. You actually had a couple of nice examples come through that, I don't know if we need that as an objective, but kind of hit me in the head for a while.
There's danger there unless we put a lot of specificity around it.
You know, we did just have a new arts commission form though, correct?
Yeah.
In the fairly recent 2 years. I mean, it would be nice if we had a statement of supporting the arts somehow.
Had the Shake Shack wall over town then.
It's starting to warm up on me. I think the colors that we talked about the Shake Shack wall it looks different than what it actually is.
And there's one coming for Whole Foods, so stay tuned. It'll be done this spring.
Oh, really?
Nice.
So
It's actually a toned down one from the one you guys saw. It's a little bit nicer.
the reason they did Shake Shack is because at least I and maybe other people complained about the fact that you drive into the town and the first thing you see is this big
Oh, yeah.
utility setup, all the utilities. They did that mural and now I wonder where they put the utilities,
Well, they actually put a false extension to the building and the utilities are hidden behind it too. So
Some of
there's
them are.
actually two things that happened out there.
Okay,
We didn't give them a CO without doing so. I mean, those utilities didn't show up on any plan that we saw.
yeah,
It's like, where'd they come from?
okay, I like the thing on 490, PA 490.
Yeah, good.
Moving to the figure on 512. I was curious, the scenic area in the center, what makes it scenic?
So that was in your last plan. And it's again something that, unless it's documented somewhere in your plan, you can't really, community ambiance or what was character it's subjective, right? And so having the scenic areas here, I think they're just the views across some of your open agricultural fields.
Yeah, that's the Priest Farm view, the one right there in the center.
Yeah,
Basically codifies it in here so that, let's say you get a application that impacts the scenic views of any of these areas called out.
You go along any of those roads in the fall time and they're absolutely stunning, so I
It
think,
gives you-
going down Strong
gives-
Road, Pierce Road.
Yeah, it gives you as the commission greater
Mhm.
cover essentially to, because it is quantified and noted in your plan.
okay, now, do we cover the entire Priest Farm there? I mean, it sort of doesn't quite make it all the way over to Sullivan Avenue, that's kind of what I'm thinking. Scenic views,
That's the Sullivan right here. I think you're there.
and Wapping Park is in here somewhere, yeah,
Yep, going down Clark Street there, the green, yep.
and Major Donnelly
Your Donnelly's there, if you go, you know, around Ayers, before you get to Ayers, that area right there is all Major Michael Donnelly.
Okay.
Going out to West Road.
What's this on Orchard Hill?
Foster Farm?
That's Foster Farm.
Foster Farm, right?
Foster Farm and a solar farm.
Farmland.
It's gonna be a scenic solar view.
It's scenic, all right.
Does qualify the date as being 2015, that's Farmland. As of 2000.
Okay. Anything else in that section? Section 12. And are we giving the right people the assignment there?
C3, Pat, you have PD, you don't really mean PD, really, do you?
That's you.
Oh, planning, I thought it was police department, okay. No, you don't really mean that, do you?
I can just write Michelle.
Okay.
if you'd like.
There you go.
Just don't mention it to them.
I think we're good.
What's TM?
Town manager.
Yeah, if you could, anywhere, like if I look in second paragraph on 6.1, affordable housing, it starts out by saying, in 2022, South Windsor adopted its first affordable housing plan, and then in the next sentence, you go on to use it, and that term is AHP. It's like just the traditional way of doing that is, after you use a capitalized term, which is a defined term, in parentheses, you put AHP, and then anything that's used after that, you understand AHP refers back to it. There's a few of these throughout this that
Picked up on you.
nitpicky, but
So this text, does sort of dance around the issue we're having with the schools. I don't know that you could get any stronger, because,
I thought it kind of spoke to the schools quite a bit, to be honest with you,
yeah,
in different locations that, where
I
was
mean, it's
appropriate.
a
It's
balance.
a reality.
Yep, you have housing needs, you have community facility impacts to balance that, so.
I think on the bottom line on 6.1, left-hand column, you need to add the word with.
This last line here?
It says
between the
municipalities have
last
less
line
than
and the first
10%.
line.
yep.
Municipalities have less than 10% of housing users that are consistent, I mean, with the statutory definition.
Yep.
That's when you're reading, when it's really late at night.
So
and it's
it's, our appeals, Pat, is only good through October 2024, we probably should be. Okay.
October,
It's the end of October 2024.
I just gave you 2 extra months.
Thank you, but.
Doing everything we can, Michelle.
I know, other people out there know the reality.
Michelle, I thought you said our moratorium was only through October.
That's why I was just having them correct that right now.
Oh, okay, okay.
So, I mean, the problem we face is that if we say, okay, well, we're only gonna allow senior housing, we then have other facilities that are impacted. I guess I'd rather hear that the community center was overloaded than the schools, because we have to educate the students, we don't have to
They pickleball.
play pickleball, yeah.
You know, what I kind of liked about this section of the plan too is, in previous plans, you kind of got to explain our situation a little bit, because we're in a different situation than we've been in previous times. And my first reaction was it's a little bit, a lot of wording and whatever, but it's very, I think it's very important for people that really want to understand to read it, because it's very filled with a lot of information. And really, I was really shocked to see the change in the average house price. I mean, geez, We went up. That's what made us not be like, so affordable to people anymore.
My house has doubled.
Your first-time home buyers really can't get in our community as easily as they could have 5 years ago, I mean, those are some of the things that we're dealing with.
You make a good point. Should we be a little bit more specific as to what happens? What handcuffs we have on once the moratorium stops? To be a little bit more explicit that,
Well, we mentioned 830G.
you know,
Yeah, it's mentioned there.
I don't know, I don't think anybody appreciates just how different this is gonna become once the moratorium's gone.
You might put a sentence or two what that means, that we're, then the town will have more constraints on their review of
Something
them,
like-
or something like that. or
Something like
just-
that, just to let
Yeah,
people
just
know
something
that.
that makes people know that we do have a,
No, it's almost like the wording we use for the siting council. We could find some way to say
yeah,
that
just not.
we don't have the
Have
same
some
level of
influence.
authority on an 830G that we would on a regular application.
Right.
We're fighting space on this page, aren't we?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna, I think, increase the font size for the update anyway, so I'll rejigger stuff.
Some places won't make a difference, other places will,
Yeah.
blow you apart. You can lose a line or two.
Did you mention the impact on other
Something like that, that
services on?
Yeah.
That would be I said it, every time we talk about it. Fire department, just all of public safety is gonna get
Is that in here somewhere? I haven't read through this.
right on the precipice of full-time fire for sure.
So, do we need a change here, or did I miss
Sorry,
something?
are we talking about specifically impacts from housing or general community facilities and services? Because that's in the next chapter.
But it's this that's gonna most likely trigger it. So,
we could also
I mean, just
contribute volunteers to the fire department, so.
what's that?
So new housing could also contribute people to the fire department, keep the volunteer status.
So we do have a bullet under objective A, ensure housing
Hasn't
growth is in alignment with the capacity of the town facilities.
House prices are a
Okay.
problem.
So that's, we note the school system, but that's also a general comment, for all,
Yeah, let's get
senior
those other
center,
things listed.
fire,
Yeah, well,
public safety.
maybe we just expand on that particular bullet and say things like
Yeah.
fire, police, community, recreation, those kinds of things all get impacted.
And also,
Senior services.
what's Angela's thing called? Are there other community services that aren't recreation that,
Human services?
human services?
Human services, yeah,
yeah.
senior and human services.
Senior and human services.
Or just social and public safety, social
Yeah, those
services
kind
and
of- yeah,
public
just
safety.
Specific department, I mean.
Yeah.
Okay, on objective B, the next to the last bullet, promote energy efficiency and electrification in new housing.
I lost track, Steve, what page were you on?
Page 6-2,
The bottom.
second to last bullet.
So why focus on electrification?
Because we ought to be reducing the use of natural gas as much as possible.
Yeah, but
So
isn't that all
electrifying-
part of energy efficiency?
Right, well,
No,
but
it's not.
we're calling, I would personally I'd like to also see people use solar hot water in their houses, like, so rather than just focus on electrification, which I think we're creating a plan that's gonna be viewed and used for the next 10 years.
Right.
It is very clear right now that electrification is not something that we can support with our current national infrastructure. There's not enough electricity for us to get rid of natural gas in houses, home heating oil in houses, to electrify all the cars, trains, and trucks. It's not there. We're seeing it, as I've said before, with every time I open the Wall Street Journal, it's at least once a week, there's another article in there.
Mhm.
Like there was 3 articles in this week on how SUV makers and electric SUVs and pickups are a complete failure. They're losing $6,000 for every $50,000 electric vehicle. They're losing $6,000. For the Ford Lightning, they're losing like $13,000. Ford's taking a $5.2 billion write-down. It's not about electrification, it's about becoming more energy efficient. And instead of just saying electrification makes it sound like we're only focused on electrification. And I think that wave is passing us by right now, and there'll be another wave. It won't be electrification. I'm not sure what it will be, but people have come to the realization that electrification is not the path solely for the future of this country.
Well, does it
But you
make
have to
sense?
look at, I mean, this is a 10-year thing, okay? And, I mean, in order, like, for electric vehicles to work, you really need 3 things to happen. You have to get people to buy the cars, and you need to have the charging capabilities, which involves infrastructure as well as charging in front of stores and stuff. And you need to have renewable energy, because otherwise you're just using natural gas to power your electric cars, okay? So all these things go in fits and starts, and they, you know, sometimes the manufacturing of cars gets ahead of the ability to charge them, and then sometimes the ability to charge them is gonna get ahead. So I think in a 10-year plan, you have to look at, you know, where we're trying to get in 10 years, not where we're trying to get next year.
So, let me just jump in for a sec if I could. I think maybe the way to approach this might be to have 2 bullets. Number one bullet would be energy efficiency, which I think is important for us, regardless of the energy source.
Right.
Energy efficiency is important. But I think then the next bullet, which builds on the sustainability and resiliency part, would be enhancing or encouraging a transition from fossil fuels, which are really the thing we're trying to get away from, to electrification and alternative energies such as solar and wind. So renewables or
Yeah.
just alternatives. So I'm just, would that be okay if we broke it into 2
I
bullets,
like
made
that.
one efficiency and the other one just?
Or just alternative energy sources that are alternatives to fossil fuels. Does that satisfy it? I really want to avoid electrification as like, as the sole strategy
No,
to
it's not the
solve the
soul,
problem.
but I think the challenge, there's multiple levels of this. So I think if we have alternative energy, the challenge that I find with some of the work that Pat and I do is that I was certainly brought up at the time that electricity for heat and other stuff was a stupid choice. You would never do it. And it's expensive and so on. But in effect, if eventually we might run out of fossil fuels or if other things are going to happen, that we need to start thinking about ways to get electrification. It's got more alternative sources that could support it. So I think we can probably get to the alternative energy sources from fossil fuels and throw electricity into the solar and wind. Just group them all together. They're all alternatives to fossil fuels.
Bingo.
All right, well, you'll send me your language.
I'll send it to you right now.
All right.
I would personally, just as a sidebar, I would personally never buy a house that was electric only. That's insanity. You have a single point of failure for every aspect of your life.
Let me ask you, what happens to your oil burner when the power goes out?
I have a small backup generator
Okay, so
to
you
power
are
that.
probably in a small minority, but yeah.
If you live in the Northeast, you probably need to have one.
Which generates electricity.
Right, but the amount of electricity that generates to power a
it's-
small fan
No, I understand.
in a natural gas furnace is 1% of the energy required to heat a house.
But we are well beyond the average Joe public's understanding of the scenario that we find ourselves in terms of energy use. People have used energy for a long period of time without always evaluating where it comes from or what its implications are. I think as Steve pointed out, maybe part of this plan would be for us to have statements about encouraging or suggesting or advising transitions. And I think we can give that a shot.
No, I like your use of the alternative alternative forms of energy as opposed to trying to identify any given one, because like you said, this is a 10-year plan. 5 years from now, electricity may be considered to be the evil vermin and you come up with something else. So I think just referring to alternative energy makes a lot more sense.
I gotta try to remember what I,
We always like to use the term specific yet
Just
flexible.
put in the notes what he said.
Yep, that's what I have.
We can listen to the recording.
Yep.
Right.
Okay, anything else on page 6.2? How are we doing on time? We got 20 minutes here. How are we doing? We're doing okay, I guess.
Do we have a hard close?
You think we'd all like to get done at 9?
Okay, then we're gonna need a second meeting.
Oh, okay.
Keep going.
No, we don't need a second meeting, we'll just keep going.
Our official closing time is 9:30, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're on the schedule.
Can I go to page 6.4 now and? Yeah, okay. Business development. Is that, are there recent changes that affect the tax base here? On the paragraph on tax base? Do we need another community concerns, or is that covered previously?
For some of them, it kind of fits within the other ones, so I don't have its own, I don't have it separate. So I tried to mix it in when I could, but sometimes it's a separate thing, sometimes it's kind of intermixed in here. So here it's intermixed.
I like this little table about the different kinds of commerce that do and don't work, at least right now. Any comments on 6.4? Any comments on 6.5?
Just, do we have approvals to use all the photos that we're using? So
They're
like the
from a
Goddard's
mix-
Guard.
They're from a
Goddard's
mix of
School.
sources.
I'm sorry?
They're from a mix of sources. I can add attributions for all of them. Some of them are mine, some of them are Google Maps, some are
If they're in
from.
the public domain, then they should be
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
okay.
so I'll just add a note to.
We have a lot of them on our website too that you can
Yeah.
use too.
In another conversation, I'll talk to you about my daughter's specialty as an attorney, an media attorney. Okay, 6.5, there's a bullet there that says establish more flexible zoning standard to support redevelopment. Not quite sure what that means.
So I think it comes down to, one of the reasons why people do greenfield development is that it's easier, right? You have a vacant lot and you can build what you want to suit. Versus I have an existing building, if I add on, I'm gonna need variances, if I'm already at my coverage limit, you know. So some places will add in incentives that say you may have relief, whether it's increased density, lower parking requirements, some relief from setbacks if you retrofit an existing building and site versus building new on a piece of farmland in an industrial zone.
some towns, for example, have a parking provision in their regulations that if you're changing the use of the building, as long as the parking is within 10%, and it's a redevelopment, as long as the parking is within 10% of the requirement, you're good to go, you get your permit. Cause sometimes, like a restaurant wants to go into a building and they're one parking space short, and what's the hardship? So you stop a business, so just being flexible, and I think we could find perhaps a way to put some words in here to provide some non-specific direction.
Yeah, we've done some similar regulations over the years. You know, in the old days, you could cover much more of a lot than you can today, for example, with pavement. So we created impervious regulations that allowed for some pervious pavements, to allow you to go up to a 70%. Just for some of our older sites that we're looking to retrofit and things like that. So we've had some situations past where we've made some regulations, but I can see where.
Your Geisler's floating zone is probably a good example, right?
A good example, yeah, where we're
You're-
trying to.
You're giving them flexibility on use in exchange
Rehabbing a
for rehabbing a
facility.
property, right? So it's a concept you guys have done before, it's just looking at kind of similar case studies for other properties as well.
So this seems to imply we're not flexible enough.
I think I think we're trying to imply that we're open to flexibility. To me, that's what it implies, that if someone comes in and they can't make something work, then that's when I start to talk with you guys. Is this something we want? Do we wanna try to see how we can help it?
Maybe we could change the word establish to continue to seek.
Or how about leverage more flexible zoning standards to support redevelopment?
Another good example was what we did for Carlos Pasta. We made a regulation that allowed them to, a portion of their building to be taller than your regulations because of the type of industry that it was. So I mean, we've had precedent where we've done it in the past to help encourage certain
Yes,
businesses.
we'll modify the language to recognize that it's something you already do, and it should continue.
And then another one, EDC on the fourth bullet. You could spell that out.
And Pat, you gotta do something with the colors on 6-6.
They're taking all your toner?
They take out my artistic colors. They clash too much for me.
Purple is industrial and red is commercial.
I know, but, oh,
It's the APA land use colors.
oh, okay. If you have a reason behind it, maybe I'll listen to it, but I looked at that and I thought, oh,
Yeah, it's the
I don't know if I'd put those together.
APA does a standard land use color scheme.
Okay.
So I try to follow that to the extent I can.
Okay, and they use purple for industrial, I find it very interesting.
Yep.
The color of love.
Okay, I have, no comments, we'll move on to the 6-7, all about town center.
I liked your graphic in the lower corner. That's a big accomplishment there.
Which graphic?
The sidewalk, showing the sidewalk at the town center,
Oh, yeah.
before and after.
Before and after.
Crosswalk.
This is why Google Maps is nice, because you can time out
You can do
back to old Google Street Views.
In 10 years, all we were able to do is put in a sidewalk.
Hey, one step at a time.
Oh.
Sorry, couldn't resist.
So there's a yellow arrow on that figure 6-3 that doesn't seem to
It's
get
unidentified,
explained.
yeah.
It's a encourage a possible main street concept.
Oh,
You
is
see
that
at the
what
very-
that is?
Yeah, the very top there, yeah.
Maybe somehow, maybe overwrite this with a more yellow
Yeah.
arrow or something.
Or make the background that rectangle darker or something.
So are we on 6-7 still?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I know we have a vision for town center, but what do we actually, what policies do we have in place to encourage redevelopment?
We have an overlay zone, the right to use an overlay zone there.
Yeah, so we've actually put a village district overlay zone in place with regulations. So your zoning regulations have, that basically allows for an intensifying of the land use, right? So you could, there's more cover, there's more flexibility in uses, there's flexibility in location of buildings. So the whole idea of the whole idea of a village district zone is it's more design driven than it is use driven. Although there are use, we do talk about residential specifically in there and to what ratio. So it can't just end up being all residential. But the envision is really more of a redevelopment scenario when buildings are gonna either come down and new ones are gonna come up, or town center is gonna had a second story or something like that. It's a longer term vision for sure, but there are properties that have been trading hands and people are compiling land and the vision is known and property owners out there are aware of it. So I think
So just let it evolve
It's gotta
naturally, there's
evolve
nothing we
naturally, yeah,
can do
it's-
to incentivize that as a
the
town?
well, the town council through, they could provide certain abatements for certain types of things. I mean, there could be that. Certainly anything we can do, like grants that we can find to do streetscape improvements and things like that, we're always looking for those kinds of things. But I think you gotta let the properties, come together. When you have different property owners, it was difficult, but as less people are out there with the properties, I think.
So it's silently marching forward.
It is marching forward, yes. I would like to say that,
Lubeck Square Light,
What's that?
Lubeck Square Light.
Well, or Mansfield, downtown Mansfield area there, those kinds of concepts, I think Glenn was really involved 10 years ago when we talked about this concept. We're not that, but we're trying to create something like that, similar to that, yeah.
We're creating the opportunities. I think the challenge that we were finding as part of the work we did 10 years ago is that the property owners are built into the cash flows they're already generating from the property. So to redevelop means you gotta give up cash flow for a year or 2 or 3 while the building gets built. And then there's much more return, but you gave up 2 or 3 years worth of income. So it requires economic circumstances that would encourage that to happen. So it's not an easy vision.
But you gotta start with a vision. So.
On page
Just
6,
one more thing, just so for your information too, that is the only area in town right now where multifamily is a permitted use. You know, assuming you're meeting all these other standards that are associated with it. You know, people, you know, they wanna rezone a lot of land around town and really, when someone asks me where you can do it as of right, this would be the only location, provided you're doing so much of it commercial, and like I said, there's a whole bunch of standards associated with it, but that is, you know, part of the redevelopment, hope for this area would be a mix.
so, page 6.8, do we wanna revisit the Main Street study? I mean, that's been, what, 10 years or?
It was only 2015, well, okay, 10 years. I think the Main Street study is still valid in that it still holds a lot of great ideas and a lot of concepts. I'm not sure that anybody on Main Street's looking for us to do anything further with it. I think we've done some of our work through the sewer discussions we're having, some of the land use discussions. You know, some of the things on the Main Street study were to get into design controls, if you will, because it would be village district kind of zoning, or getting into more flexibility on uses. I think when we did our accessory apartment regulations, we opened up that part of it a little bit, so that you can get an apartment very easily if you wanted to on Main Street. I don't hear anybody really looking for us to make many changes on Main Street right now. The study, to me, as far as I'm concerned, is still, I pull it out periodically when people talk about we should do some kind of pathway along Main Street. I don't know if you recall, it was very well thought out in that study, and they, you know, looked at, you know, contextually what kind of pathway might be appropriate. So I don't really know if it's worth trying to, you know, pursue too much of new zoning out there at this particular moment. If people start to make noise and want to see more, certainly I'd let you know, but I'm not hearing anything along those lines.
Okay,
Main Street.
moving on, anything else on Buckland Road is the next one, 6.9, anything there?
On the upper right, halfway down the paragraph, this sentence I'm just questioning. There is also an opportunity to better align the zoning of this parcel within the overall vision for the Buckland Road corridor. So what alignment are you speaking to?
So right now, this parcel is essentially an island of its own zoning designation. It doesn't, it's not part of the Buckland Gateway. And the type of development that it aligns with is kind of more big box. You have a 50-acre site, essentially what they have in
Yeah.
Manchester to the south.
So
right?
what I think of when I think of that statement, I think of like the setbacks that we apply along Buckland Road. I think of the design criteria that we apply along our Buckland Road standards. I think of the landscaping, you know, we tried to build in higher standards in the Buckland Road zoning. This piece here goes back to the 70s and you could cover 80% of the land. So, that statement, we tried to do it 10 years ago and the owner of the property wasn't really interested because they saw it as us adding regulation to their piece of property. But that was kind of what our vision was, to try to make it not be just like anything goes retail, but retail that was a little bit more designed, and so that's what that statement. And there's two different ways you can look at it, because we have housing in our Buckland Road.
That's
And now that,
That's
but
where I was going.
yeah, but I think we've made a couple other clear statements to me, which I'm really happy to see, that are like, we're not looking for housing there.
Yeah.
And when you get an application in, it says, how does it conform with your POCD? When you say it doesn't, we don't want housing there, that's a pretty clear statement. So I think we've done that pretty well from the last time we
Yep.
looked at this.
I was just making sure there wasn't
Yeah,
a
no.
conflict between those two.
And
No, I know what you
your
mean, I
Buckland
thought the same
zone
thing.
limits the number of units, right? And those have all been up.
Yeah, but maybe you do wanna put something in there like related to design standards, or that, you know, architectural and aesthetics, or something along those lines. Cause that really was what that piece lacks.
Yeah, page 6.10,
Wait, one sec, could you go to 8.11 just for a second? Since you said to look at both at the same time. A5 and A6, there's no lead entity, look at either of those concepts?
guys wanna be the lead?
No, I
Those
want
are
to make
both
sure we
keys,
don't
though.
get on there as the lead, so.
Yep,
No.
I'll add you, I think those are both PCC items, so
Just,
good catch.
I'll throw Michelle in there for good measure.
Sorry,
And then
Kenny.
just as an A3, you got a little dyslexic, it's ADRC, not ARDC.
80.
Okay,
I wouldn't talk.
page 610, there's an objective that says continue access management. Are we referring to the driveway thing?
Yeah, oh yeah, we have a very strong.
Just wanna make sure,
Yep.
okay.
I've
Yep.
used you guys as a case study for other communities, so you guys have a very good access management regulation.
There's a picture here of Whole Foods that needs to be updated. They don't have a crane anymore.
Yeah, we need to do better, I thought the same thing, we don't want that crane there.
Do you have an updated one, Michelle?
Yeah.
Yeah, the parking lot's full, that's the update.
Slightly different.
611, any comments? 612, any comments?
So, you know, but 613, 613 again was where I was thinking the 291 reference really needs to show up.
And I was looking at these bar charts you have, and I kind of think of the unsure people as kind of in the middle. I would put them in the middle.
Does it make more sense to use a percentage too?
Yeah, I like percentage rather than round numbers. And we've already said how many people responded, right, more or less, so.
And that first paragraph on the left, the last line says for support of industrial uses, it should say of.
Yeah.
I'm just going on 614, anything? On to chapter 7. A lot of good stuff about the schools. I think we've heard that several times.
I just had a mention on 7.2, the last paragraph on sustainability, we do have LID development regulations, or that we encourage LID development, so under sustainability here.
Some districts.
Yeah.
Just back to 614 for a second, just silly thing on the picture that shows Dunkin' Donuts. Should we get a more recent one that has Oscars as the other side? As opposed to whatever's on there?
The smoke shop?
You don't have to show the smoke shop, but all the way on the right-hand side. 614.
So Dunkin' Donuts, big number.
No, I'm looking at the wrong, never mind. I had the wrong picture, never mind.
Yeah.
Pass. Move on.
Nothing to see here.
Yep.
The sustainability paragraph on 7.2, I think we've been claiming, and I should probably take an action item, but we've been claiming that as of 2023, we had 100% of the town's electric energy comes from renewable sources.
Okay.
So I'm not sure it's really 100%, it may
Do
be
you guys have
like
an updated, like-
95% or something.
Do you guys have like an energy plan update that you could send me? You're on the energy committee, right, Steve?
Yeah,
One of your many hats.
but we haven't updated the plan.
Okay.
Um,
So I'll add a placeholder. If we don't have it
Say
in
virtually
the
all.
draft, we can add it to the final draft in June.
I think what may have happened is we were at 100% and then we started building bigger schools and things like that and taking, you know, drifted back away from that, so. I don't know if I can give you that even, but it's certainly not 44%.
Steve, I think Scott Roberts can give you that, because in doing the budget, they said something about that
Mhm.
last night, so.
Okay, who did?
Scott Roberts,
Scott,
he
okay.
probably has a good sense about it.
looking at all kinds of yellow and orange and green dots on 7.
If I can jump in just for a sec, I think we had the conversation earlier about the challenges facing the fire department.
Uh-huh.
And I was originally making a note in the dot table to put it in there, but I think that's really talking about the physical facility. So if it's okay with the commission on page 7-2, under other town facilities, I think just throw in a short paragraph about, you know, the challenges with an aging population and increasing demands on the fire department in terms of training and everything else. This is a challenge for the future. Just
I
leave it
think
at that.
also, I mean, it's just harder for people to volunteer for things like that. And I don't know what's going on in that, but I think we're looking at more and more full-time.
Yes, I think it's worth noting.
Yeah, we
Yep.
did do a questionnaire with the fire chief, and he noted that mutual aid has been kind of it's bought you guys time, because you're surrounded by municipalities that have full-time fire departments, that if you need coverage during the day, when you have a lot of your volunteers at work, you know, you're able to pull that, but that also is, again, it's buying you time, it's not necessarily a long-term solution, so.
All right, so we move on to 7.5.
Actually, quick question on 7374. Is it possible if we could have some sort of key or label? And I know we all know what green, yellow, red is, but I'm thinking if someone is colorblind or partially
Yep,
colorblind
that's a
or
great
matching that up.
I think we had a key when we first looked at this table.
Did we?
We used to. We don't have one, we used to.
Yeah.
All right, 7.5, those objectives. I mean, this is a lot of investment that we're talking about here.
5 or 7.5 or 7.6?
7.5, provide adequate community facilities, provide community facilities that are accessible. Like the current Park and Rec building has some accessibility challenges.
Future facility investments. It seems strange if they both,
Oh, that's ChatGPT.
I'll throw up in my.
I mean, I'm pretty happy with page 7.5 myself. For some reason, I made it on 7.6, I made a note, Governor Highway, but I don't know if I had a text change to go with it.
You're probably just thinking no trucks, that's all.
Hmm?
Probably word association, no trucks, governor's highway.
Building.
On the 7.7, where you talk about the walk and wheelways, I wonder if it's worth disqualifying that you're a subcommittee of our Park and Recreation Committee. You're not, it's not a committee that the town council necessarily established, so just to locate them in the world, right?
Yeah.
Because you're a subcommittee of Park and Rec.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So is walk and wheelways, do they have oversight or?
That's what I'm saying, they're a subcommittee, right, to the Park and Recreation Commission, so they would report to the Park and Recreation Commission,
So Molly also
staff them.
most of our meetings.
So what about we're supposed to have sidewalks within a certain perimeter, what is it, a third or half mile of each school? Does that fall under the Board of Ed, Public
No,
Works?
that actually
or-
fall under Public Works and Engineering, so every year, engineering will either apply for funding for sidewalks based on our sidewalk plan, like, for example, we had funding, recently to get sidewalks around our old town center, so down like by post office, down Deming, that whole thing is gonna be completed. So engineering kind of picks out of the sidewalk plan different areas, either public interest where sidewalks are interested, or we pick areas where we need linkages. I know the one on Ayers Road, for example, that is funded through this. So for many, many years, the town didn't fund sidewalks actively when things got tight. We used to have an active budget, then we didn't. Developers built our sidewalks, but just in the last, 5, 10 years, especially when we've been doing bonds, we've been getting more sidewalk money. for repairs and for new sidewalks. So, the plan that we put in here is a more general plan, really to kind of give Public Works some flexibility on where they do sidewalks. Again, based on some of the priorities we have here, but also, you know, when you got a road where nobody wants it and a road where people want it, it's easier to go to where people want it. And they, you know, so some of that will play into it too a little bit. Because it can be, as you know, people want them, they want them, but they want them on the other side, or, you know. And so we're trying to be successful with our decisions. So there'll be some more on Foster Street, for example. I know there's another linkage on Foster to connect where we have some missing links. So.
Yeah, we have,
So on page 7, I scribbled, you know, Blaze hiking trails again, which I think we covered somewhere else. So do we want to mention the Rye Park mountain bike trails that,
It's part of the,
I think they actually show on one of the trail maps, but.
yeah, they do. You know about those, it's like mountain bike track.
Yeah, I think we have it on one. I would say we can, that, I would almost reference that in conservation.
Okay.
When I look at bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, I think of it more of, in this context, as a transportation mode versus a recreational mode,
Okay.
but I can reference that, and I'll put a note in chapter 5.
So I had a comment on the map 7-9. I was concerned with how many stars there were,
Yeah, I agree.
to
A lot
me,
of those
I don't
work.
think that's what we're really saying. You know, to me, that implies we want trucks anywhere ever,
So
and that's really not what we want.
let me explain just a little background of the rationale,
Okay.
just so you guys understand my thinking, and then obviously I'm happy to take direction from you. The rationale here, so the through truck prohibition doesn't mean you can ban all trucks. It simply is an enforcement mechanism that says a truck can't use this as a cut-through route. And so I was thinking of it in the context of the Route 5 industrial zones, where you have trucks that are putting on their GPS, and they're going whatever way the GPS tells them to. So the idea of having the through truck prohibition on all of the east-west roads is to essentially funnel all of the truck traffic from your industrial users down Route 5 to I-291, and that is their only way to get to or from
Yeah,
the highway.
it's just our police will tell you whether you're a through truck or not is, you know, how do you know?
Yep.
Number one, so enforcement right off the bat
Yep.
is a nightmare. I was wondering if maybe we could change it, be more like, these are areas where we're looking for truck routing through our approval process, because we did add that into part of our warehousing requirements now, that we need to see truck routing, so then we can discourage things like that. I just know when people look at something being like a through prohibition, and I know that enforcement is an issue, that I don't wanna encourage it through some kind of plan that we're gonna be able to do that, cause I just don't think that we can.
But Michelle, we just had the chief of police go out on, I don't know all these roads, but a lot of the roads that are South Windsor roads over there, and request that they be prohibited by trucks and that the GPS be changed.
but that
I'd
has
like
to be
see how
done.
that works out.
No, but the
Yeah, how's
GPS
that
people,
enforced?
if you have an official truck prohibition, the GPS companies will
And
implement.
OSTA's the only one that can give that at the
Right.
state level, it can't be done at the local level.
The town has to apply for a through truck prohibition that needs to be approved by OSTA before it becomes enforceable.
Did we apply? We did
Just
apply.
did.
You would just apply.
But I would say like a month ago or so, it was after people from the other side of town came,
Governors.
and we pushed it through, and I know the chief of police did it, you know, because they came back the following meeting and reported that they had completed that information. So now we have to wait for, what is it, OSHA to come back to us.
So what, do we have somewhere a list of where he applied? Cause we should put that in this map.
It's only Governor's Highway to my knowledge.
No, he got more generic than that, cause we wanted Belden, Governor's Highway, and I think there's something else, Michelle, but the chief of police would know, or we could get it from her. Do you want me to ask? 'Cause
No, I'll follow up on it. I just am concerned, the visual of this from an economic development point of view. You know, on the surface, someone looks at this and it's like, well, geez, you know, we have trucks, they don't want us in your town. I just think we wanna
Deming
maybe.
Street, I think, would be
Maybe we
another one.
instead of stars, maybe we make it.
Well, this map becomes much more logical when you overlay it against a zoning map. where all of these red stars, for the most, like, Rye Street's a little deceiving because it's after Aldi's, and after the glass recycle place, whatever. So if you overlaid a zoning map, this makes sense. It means that we're trying to protect our citizens by keeping trucks off of residential streets. That's the
Yes, sir.
translation.
I would go with the Governor Highway one, I'd go with the Deming Street
Deming
one.
for
Yeah,
sure,
I'd
yeah.
take Sullivan Ave off, because
Take
Sullivan
off
Ave
Well,
is.
Sullivan doesn't make sense.
You,
Right in
you
front
got
of
trucks all the way down
FedEx.
to.
It actually does make sense because what we're trying to do is prevent R&L and FedEx from running tandems from 84 coming from Boston, down Oakland, and down Sullivan. That's the problem. It's the tandem tractor trailers from those two places that are a headache.
I don't think Sullivan was part of it though. I mean,
Tan-
I know Belden
Tandem I
was
could see,
and Governors were.
but with FedEx using that, I think that'd be really tough to enforce.
So what if we kind of broaden this as consider through truck prohibitions or or truck routing
Truck
strategies
routing.
and kind of keep it more broad?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
those,
yeah.
one of those solutions may be applicable to all places.
And we
but
might
may
be
not-
able
maybe
to
not both.
affect one easier than the other,
Yeah.
you know,
That makes sense.
Can we put prohibitions on state highways? I kinda doubt it.
I was just thinking that,
I
yeah.
think
You can't.
I think you can request it through OSTA. There were some state roads listed on there.
So I think the other way to do it is rather than pose it as a negative, which is a truck prohibition, if we actually stated it as suggested truck routing priorities or
getting them people to our
something. I don't know what
Route
the
5
wording would be
corridor and
yet.
291.
But I think it's Pat's concept of we try to get people up to 91 north and in the 91 at the north, 291 at the south, didn't come off the map at me, right? Until I suddenly, Pat said it, and then I
How
got
would we
it.
do preferred trucking, path, you know, preferred trucking routes or something like
Mhm.
that? I mean, maybe
We could
we.
do some arrows, just kind of
Yeah,
point
maybe
down
we
the
try to
Route 5.
Or
direct
even,
people
we got a
where
lot
we
going
wanna
on already,
go.
but even the halos on the roads or something
Yep.
like that.
You know,
Yeah, even just
directing
kind of
people towards Route
conceptual,
5.
like,
Yeah,
this
so,
way,
yeah.
this way.
Directing
that
people
way.
to
Yeah, I don't think you
291
can
or
cut off the
something.
state
Can we,
highways, but.
can we, I think we beat that one to death. Can we go back to 7, 8?
7, 8?
Yeah, there's a thing under manage congestion and there's implement traffic calming strategies. And I'd like to add speed limits to the engineering. Because I think we can reduce speed limits. We're gonna have to do that to get to net zero.
Mhm.
I mean, a lot of places they're recommending now 20-mile-an-hour residential speed limit. Of course, you gotta enforce it. And I like the automated enforcement, although we don't have to mention that here. I don't know if the town council's, you had an executive session on that, so you probably can't talk about it, but the speed limit enforcement cameras,
Yeah, I don't,
but we'd like to, I think that's a good idea, but the public hasn't been asked to comment on that. But I would put speed limits in there. And then we have a complete street plan that's a little out of date and
I'll be honest with you, it's currently being reviewed and updated through staff
okay.
as we speak, so,
So can we just say update the complete
yeah.
instead of develop? And are we done with section 7? I love, the colors again on page 711. They need to be darker.
Fortunately, that's just a screenshot of your walking wheelways map, so I don't have the ability to edit it.
A comment on 710. If you go to this circle, to the right of the high school, it says the label for Nevers Road. Right where it says Nevers Road is a gap in the sidewalks. There are no sidewalks for that. It's a long stretch. So I don't know if we
Shift that up, yeah.
move the label somewhere else or just get
Hopefully
rid of
that
it.
sidewalk will be built soon,
Or,
but yeah.
or thicken the line, in which
It's-
case, but
that-
yeah, you're right, it's still
it's a
gonna be under
gap.
the label, yeah.
It's like, it's a huge gap and, I mean, I see kids walking down that every day after high school. That's not, I loathe that.
If I'm not mistaken, that'll be done at the same time as the Ayers Gap, but, so, I'm pretty sure that's one of the ones.
So yeah, the yellow, well, I don't know where we're gonna get a map, but the yellow line on 7-Eleven is,
I could at least add a trace to that,
Yeah,
or
orange,
trace
go
over it.
orange or something.
and then there's a yellow area, very hard to find.
Yeah.
State-owned land area.
We'll send a memo to the Walking Wheelways Committee to
Good.
I love the table of the sewer capacities. I've actually never seen that table. Even though I was a chair of WPCA for 2 years.
And that I think might not have some of the newer development at Evergreen Walk as well, so the capacity may actually even be higher for Clark Street.
Mhm.
So,
You know, somewhere in there, can we connect the idea of maintaining the aquifer to the use of septic on that page 712? Septic is always viewed negatively, but it's actually a positive in some ways. Because that water that we take out of the ground now goes into, if you have a sewer, it goes into the Connecticut River. You have a septic, it goes into the aquifer. Since we're worried about droughts and things like that.
Yeah, the 714 map, I think, should we show the sewer for the, down there, right there?
I don't have it.
You don't have it. Okay,
I don't think I have the MDC system files, and I think this is just the ones that are in your WPCA. But again, that's probably a question for Thad. I'll kind of.
Because I know it's on their sewer use map.
Mm-hmm.
It shows up as a property that uses sewers, so.
I think I'll have a long request at that tomorrow morning.
And I'm going 713. We did talk about electrification, but I do think we're going to see more and more demand for electric use. And we talk about electric school buses, for example. I suspect that power line that runs down toward the electric school bus, or the school bus depot, no way is it gonna support electric school bus in that. So we need to do something about encouraging, the utility to,
Is that the second
Yeah, I
bullet
think the
on
second bullet
713
kinda
in the right
captures
column?
yeah, okay, I guess you got it. But I think we're gonna demand more and more of our grid, and we're gonna
One
put
of,
our,
one of my bigger fears is with the amount of probably not vacant, I'm not saying mass tech is a good use for this, but we have some industrial property in town that is underutilized.
Mhm.
My biggest fear right now would be a data center coming in for AI. Like, I don't know if you've seen the thing where they're looking at
Oh,
building a
terrible.
data center in Waterford.
yeah,
That one data center, which is really just gonna be an AI, artificial intelligence data center, will consume something like 8% of the nuclear power plant in Niantic Energy.
Yeah, I know our industrial area, I have a user that's coming to talk to me tomorrow about the EV chargers they're being required to put in because of their current electric consumption and the concern they have. So this is the first I've heard of that in our industrial area, so. It may be something that, because when you look at the Eversource map, I think we looked at one time, our Route 5 corridor is all red, which shows at their capacity, so.
I mean, the thing on Meter Warford, that substation is ridiculously huge, but that's not designed for this side of South Windsor. That's for Ellington
Yep.
and up to Crystal Lake.
you talking about the one on Barber Hill Road?
Yeah, that's what we're gonna do.
And when you look at the capacity lines, you can see a lot of green, which means there's a lot more room to add to them, so. But that's an interesting one that I'll be curious to see what they tell us tomorrow. They may come back to you for a waiver of the EV chargers or deference of them. Put up some.
Alright, we got one more page. 716.
What's interesting is if they did solar and storage, then they wouldn't have that issue with their EV chargers.
Unless it's cloudy.
Seven
Unless it's cloudy
sixteen,
or night.
the first line under regional approach, hazards facing South Windsor face,
What page?
What page?
on
Take
seven
off
sixteen.
face, yeah, are not unique.
The first line under regional approach, I think. One of those faces have to go
Double
away.
faced. And that's a plan that also is underway right now, and a plan update, so we'll kind of be tracking that over
To see if
the
it's
late
done.
spring.
Yeah, yeah.
And we can update
Correcting
that.
that first line.
We've taken
Okay.
part in a lot of the updating of it.
So on that same page, I was wondering, do we have a map of flood prone areas and hazard prone areas?
We have that in the conservation section, so maybe I can add a reference to C figure, yeah.
Good idea.
Okay. Oh, the schedule has us sending this off a week from now.
That doable, Pat?
Is that, I mean, I think, are we giving you a challenge that's,
I mean, most of these are pretty small edits. I mean, some of the things like the map updates may not get in if the data's not available, but we can target that for the final plan in June. But, you know, this is mostly kind of minor housekeeping stuff, so, it should be, what I'll do is I'll kind of shoot for, I'll kind of set an internal deadline of Friday to try to get that tracked out to Michelle.
and then, if there's a list of things that people owe you,
Tomorrow morning, I'll send out the
And I can turn around pretty quick with it.
yeah, Thad's always been good about turning around GIS stuff, and then I have a couple things for you as well, so.
And then, you know, then we'll have the 65-day period where, you know, we will get it, we being the staff will get it out to everybody, let them know about it. Give them a link onto the website where they can get it. Town council may or may not choose to hold a public hearing on it in that 65 days. We'll gather any public comment and then we'll look to schedule our public hearing in June on it.
so there might be two public hearings, council and,
Correct, if the council wants to, or the council, you know, I don't know how they'll decide they wanna handle it. They're in the middle of budget, they may be so consumed with budget.
Yeah, so the council and CROG both provide advisory reviews of the plan. So the town council, really the only statutory references are if they take action to not endorse the plan, you need a supermajority of PZC to adopt.
Or any part of the, even if there's a sentence, they say, we object to this sentence, or we are not in favor, that triggers as passes
Yep.
a 2/3 vote to override. And if the commission cannot get that 2/3 vote, then that sentence or section could not be included in the way
And
it's
so
then
there's
crafted.
essentially three things the town council could do. They can take action and endorse the plan. They can take action and not endorse all or parts of the plan, or they can take no action, which is most common, which from the statutory side is the same as an endorsement. So you need just a simple majority to adopt the
And
plan.
that's a 65-day period that they'll have that choice.
Correct. Yep, and they can hold a public hearing within that 65-day window. But again, those are their kind of three potential actions.
And Caroline's sitting here as our town council liaison, so she's hearing all this. And we'll,
do we
Public
need
hearing is
to,
not a public hearing like the commission would do for an application. The public hearing is for the council to hear comment from the community so they can assemble their remarks
comments
back to
go.
you. So it's not a public referendum. The statutory authority to adopt the plan rests solely with the Planning and Zoning Commission. But this is influential guidance that you might receive from the council or from CROG.
so, do we need to bring this to them, or will they just get it?
we will take a letter that we're gonna write and we're gonna send it out to all of our boards and commissions. As well as we'll probably put out a press release with the draft plans out there for comment. So we'll do our best to let people know about it. It'll be out on our website. We'll have a place that people can submit comments to us. We'll gather comments for the public hearing. I'll communicate, through the town manager and the clerk of the council to get to the town council, provide them with copies of the plan as well, and see what different groups wanna do, make ourselves available, staff available to answer questions or whatever.
In terms of final deliverables, there's this, is there an edited version of this?
So
Like,
once.
like last time?
So we will get you an edited version of this for we'll call it the public draft, by the end of this week, which will then start the referral process at your meeting next week. And then after the 65-day public comment period, you are able to make additional edits to the plan, whether it's kind of your own comments or whether you want to incorporate any feedback you've heard from the public, other boards and commissions.
So that, thank you, that actually wasn't my question. A shortened version, is there a shortened version of this, or is this it?
This is it.
Okay.
We will have the appendices, which will be kind of more of a summary that we'll include as appendices. So we have our 4 booklets: conservation, development, infrastructure, sustainability, and resiliency. That if you want, to pass that along as kind of a Spark Notes version of some of the key concepts, that'll be available.
I actually, that development one, for example, I give to a lot of different people, refer it to them, because it's got a lot of good census data in there. If you want to see trends in town, it's really got a lot of stuff that's not included in the final version, but it's really good background stuff. So those 4 booklets, I would have right out with our plan out on our website, because they really are good informational.
So just so everyone knows, I will not be here next week.
Neither will I.
The solar eclipse, then the 9th, and then my grandson's birthday, so I'll be in Texas.
Oh, nice.
Exciting.
So we'll have 4 people here. You'll be here?
I will not.
I will not.
So Kevin, I'll just make sure. I
Kevin
have-
knows he's gonna be chair.
Kevin, Sharon, and I, okay. Yep. And Stephanie will be here.
I'll be here, so I'll be back.
Yeah, we'll have 4.
You'll have enough to refer.
Yeah, we'll have enough.
Excellent.
We're gonna have a very short meeting. I only have one application I'm putting on, which is the renewal of the soccer field that we've had multiple times. So other than the referral and the soccer field, there's not anything else. It'll be a short agenda. And we are meeting in here again because we do not have the council chambers. The town council will be up there, so.
Before we adjourn, Caroline, have we had, has the council had any discussion about doing that triad meeting that we've kind of just thrown around where it's town council and the Board of Ed, like maybe either meeting one time or getting some kind of a regularly scheduled meeting so we're all in alignment with what's really going on with each other?
Yeah, I had asked for that, and because of the budgets, it's being pushed back until we get past the budgets in like late June. But we will have something probably June, July, but we have to get through the budgets.
Thank you.
Now, can we make a motion to adjourn?
We're done, right?
Yes. Yes.
We adjourn.
Yes.
I have a motion to adjourn. I have a second.
Second.
I think just that
Favor?
Uh,
Any opposed? We're adjourned.
Thank you for first.
Opposed?